You have tried to achieve something important and failed, perhaps multiple times. You have told yourself, I'll try my best, or I hope this works, or if circumstances permit. These phrases seemed harmless, even modest and realistic. But I am going to show you that these phrases program failure into your subconscious mind with absolute precision. Every time you say, I'll try, you telegraph to the mechanism that controls 90% of your mental and physical resources. I expect to fail and am preparing an excuse. Your subconscious, receiving this instruction, mobilizes accordingly. You guarantee the very failure you hope to avoid. Most men do not realize they are programming their own defeat dozens of times daily through careless language and divided consciousness. They blame circumstances, bad luck, or lack of opportunity, never recognizing that their consciousness created every failure they experienced. There exists a specific mental state in which failure cannot occur. Not failure is unlikely. Failure literally cannot register in consciousness. The men who have achieved great wealth operate from this state. It is not innate. It is not reserved for the gifted or fortunate. It can be systematically constructed through precise techniques I will reveal in these pages. The question is whether you will construct it or continue preparing for the failures you claim you want to avoid. The one trait that predicts success with mathematical certainty. After 20 years of studying more than 500 successful men, Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, John D., Rockefeller, and hundreds of others, I made a discovery that contradicted everything I had expected to find. I had anticipated that successful men would possess superior intelligence, exceptional education, or fortunate circumstances. I found none of these things. What I found instead was far more radical and far more accessible to the ordinary man. Every man who had risen to great wealth and achievement possessed exactly one distinguishing characteristic. He had eliminated the concept of failure from his consciousness, not diminished it, not managed it, not prepared for it while hoping to avoid it, eliminated it entirely. This is not optimism. This is not positive thinking dressed in pleasing words. This is a fundamental reconstruction of how the mind itself processes reality. Let me give you an example that will make this clear. Thomas Edison conducted 10,000 experiments before perfecting the electric light. When a newspaper reporter asked if he felt discouraged by so many failures, Edison's response revealed everything. I have not failed. I have successfully discovered 10,000 ways that will not work. Do you grasp the significance of this statement? Edison had so thoroughly removed failure from his mental vocabulary that even repeated unsuccessful attempts could not register as failures in his consciousness. To him, each experiment that did not produce light was a successful discovery of what would not work. His mind literally lacked the category to interpret these outcomes as failures. The physical world gave him exactly what his consciousness expected: eventual, inevitable triumph. Most men would have quit after the 100th unsuccessful experiment. They would have quit because they entertained failure as a possible outcome from the very beginning. The moment you hold failure as possible, you divide your mental force. Part of your mind pursues success. Part prepares for failure. This division guarantees mediocre results at best. Now, you can identify any man's destiny by examining a single aspect of his consciousness. Does he hold failure as a possible outcome, or has he eliminated it entirely? Ask yourself this question about your own definite purpose. Be honest. Do you truly believe failure is impossible? Or are you preparing for it even while pursuing success? Your honest answer predicts your results with mathematical certainty. I have studied men who succeeded despite crushing poverty, limited education, physical disabilities, and economic depressions. Their circumstances were often far worse than those who failed. Yet they succeeded while men with every apparent advantage failed utterly. The difference existed entirely in consciousness. They operated as if failure was not available as an option. Consider the eagle pursuing its prey. When focused on its target, the eagle's vision literally cannot process obstacles in its field of view. Its entire consciousness concentrates on the objective. Successful men operate identically. They do not ignore obstacles. They genuinely do not register them as threats to ultimate success. Obstacles become information about method, never evidence of potential failure. This is the mathematical law. When failure does not exist as a category in your consciousness, your mind cannot scatter energy preparing for defeat. All mental force flows in one direction. This concentrated power produces results that appear miraculous to ordinary observers. But there is no miracle. There is only law operating with precision. When facing your next important decision or challenge, conduct this experiment. Catch yourself using conditional language. I'll try, I hope, if it works. Each time you detect such language, immediately restate your intention in absolute terms. I will accomplish this. Notice the difference in how this feels. The ordinary man says, I'll try to close this sale. The man operating from failure-free consciousness says, I will serve this customer's needs and complete this transaction. The difference seems subtle, but one statement transmits doubt to the subconscious mind. The other transmits certainty. Practice this language. Shift for one full week. You will discover that your actions, your bearing, and even the responses of others begin to change immediately. This is not psychology. This is fundamental law. Why intelligent, educated men remain poor, while ordinary men grow rich. I am about to reveal something that will disturb many educated men, but truth serves no purpose if it remains pleasant and unchallenging. Intelligence and education do not guarantee success. In fact, I have observed that they often guarantee failure. This seems impossible, I know. How can intelligence be a liability? How can education work against a man rather than for him? Yet I have witnessed this phenomenon thousands of times across 2 decades of research. Highly educated men, graduates of prestigious universities, men of obvious intelligence living in poverty or mediocre circumstances. Meanwhile, men of average intelligence, limited education, sometimes barely literate, accumulating fortunes and building empires. The reason is disturbing because it reveals how our institutions inadvertently program failure into those they claim to serve. Education trains the mind to consider all possibilities. This sounds reasonable until you understand what it actually means. It means entertaining failure. The educated man learns to identify what might go wrong. He learns critical thinking, which means discovering reasons why plans will not work. He learns to be realistic, which means acknowledging failure as probable. Meanwhile, the man of average intelligence, unburdened by sophisticated education in failure awareness, pursues his purpose with simple certainty. Let me give you a concrete example. Andrew Carnegie built a steel empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His formal education ended in his early teens. Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing and became one of the wealthiest men in America. University-trained engineers mocked him as a simple mechanic. Yet these educated men worked for Carnegie and Ford as employees, drawing modest salaries while their less educated employers accumulated fortunes. The difference was not intelligence. Carnegie and Ford succeeded precisely because they lacked the sophisticated education that would have taught them all the reasons why their plans were impossible. Think about what happens in a university. A young man proposes an ambitious business plan. His professors, men who have never built businesses themselves, immediately begin identifying obstacles. Have you considered this risk? What about that problem? The market conditions don't favor this. The capital requirements are prohibitive. The student learns to see obstacles as insurmountable barriers. He graduates educated in reasons why he will fail. The uneducated man never learns these sophisticated reasons for failure. He sees an opportunity and pursues it with uncomplicated certainty. When obstacles arise, he does not possess the extensive education that would help him construct elaborate arguments for why these obstacles prove his endeavor impossible. He simply finds a way around them. I do not advocate ignorance. Intelligence is valuable when properly directed. But intelligence directed by failure consciousness becomes a curse rather than a blessing. The educated man can identify 100 reasons why his goal might not be achieved. He can calculate probabilities of failure with impressive precision. This ability, which seems like an asset, actually becomes his greatest liability. Intelligence should serve definite purpose, never undermine it. Here is the critical distinction. The educated man who has eliminated failure from consciousness uses his intelligence to discover how he will succeed. The educated man who maintains failure consciousness uses his intelligence to explain why he might fail. Both men possess intelligence. Only one succeeds. When you face a challenge or pursue a goal, observe how your educated mind responds. Does it immediately begin identifying obstacles and calculating risks? Does it construct logical arguments for why success might not occur? If so, your education is working against you. Instead, ask yourself only this question. Given that success is certain, what specific methods will produce it? Refuse to entertain any other question. When your mind attempts to present obstacles as threats, reframe them. This obstacle exists. Given that I will succeed, how does this obstacle inform my method? This single shift from if I succeed to how I succeed redirects intelligence from failure preparation to success discovery. Your education becomes an asset rather than a liability. The law operates with complete impartiality. Intelligence serves whichever consciousness directs it. Direct it toward failure possibilities, and it will construct elaborate barriers to your success. Direct it toward success methods, and it will discover ways through every obstacle. The choice is yours. The paradox, acting with certainty when circumstances scream uncertainty. Now I must address the question that arises in every thinking man's mind when he encounters these principles. How can I maintain certainty when circumstances are genuinely uncertain? How can I act as if success is guaranteed when external reality suggests otherwise? This appears to be a paradox. It is not. The confusion arises from a fundamental misunderstanding about the relationship between consciousness and circumstances. Most men believe circumstances cause outcomes. They see economic depression and conclude they must fail. They encounter obstacles and interpret these as signs that success is becoming less likely. They have the relationship backwards. Circumstances are effects, not causes. Your dominant thought patterns create circumstances. External reality is the manifestation of internal consciousness. When you grasp this principle, truly grasp it, the apparent paradox dissolves. Let me illustrate. During the financial panic of 1893, banks collapsed by the hundreds. Businesses failed by the thousands. Men who had been wealthy became paupers overnight. In the midst of this devastation, Andrew Carnegie stood before his partners and declared his intention to expand operations dramatically. His partners thought he had lost his reason. They presented facts. No credit was available. No buyers existed for steel products. Economic ruin surrounded them on every side. How could he speak of expansion when the entire nation was contracting in fear? Carnegie's response was simple. Gentlemen, it is precisely because everyone else is contracting that we must expand. These circumstances are temporary effects of widespread failure consciousness. Our consciousness of opportunity will create different circumstances for us. He expanded. Within 2 years, he dominated his industry. Do you see what occurred? Carnegie understood that the economic depression reflected collective consciousness, millions of men holding failure and fear as their dominant thoughts. But he also understood that an individual who maintains success consciousness during collective failure consciousness creates individual success regardless of collective circumstances. The circumstances most men saw as causes, Carnegie recognized as effects. He knew they would shift to match his consciousness, not the other way around. Here is the principle you must understand. Your current circumstances reflect your consciousness of 90 days ago. There is always a time lag between shift in consciousness and shift in circumstances. External reality cannot change instantly. It must catch up to consciousness. This time lag is where most men fail. They change their consciousness, expect immediate external changes, see no immediate shift, and conclude the principle does not work. They abandon their new consciousness and return to old patterns. Then they guarantee failure. Think of it this way. Imagine standing on railroad tracks, seeing a train approaching from 2 miles away. You have certain knowledge the train will arrive, even though it is not yet present. You do not doubt the train's arrival simply because it has not reached you yet. You understand the principle of cause and effect with a time element between them. Successful men view their goals with identical certainty. The goal is not yet manifest, but the cause has been set into motion through consciousness. Arrival is certain, only the timing remains unknown. When you face circumstances that contradict your goals, you must perform a critical mental discipline. Separate observable facts from interpretation. Facts are neutral. Interpretation assigns meaning. For example, the fact might be, I attempted 12 sales presentations this week and completed no transactions. That is an observable fact. But what does this fact mean? The man with failure consciousness interprets it as, I am failing. My goal is in jeopardy. The man with failure-free consciousness interprets the identical fact as, my approach requires adjustment. I'm gathering information about which methods serve these customers. Same facts. Different interpretation, different consciousness, different outcomes will follow. Remember this. Present circumstances reflect past consciousness. Future circumstances will reflect present consciousness. Never judge your present consciousness by present circumstances. Judge present circumstances by whether they match your consciousness of 3 months ago. This understanding allows you to maintain certainty despite apparently contradictory external reality. You are not ignoring reality, you are understanding its actual relationship to consciousness. You are not deluding yourself, you are operating from correct understanding of cause and effect. The successful man moves forward with certainty while standing at the precipice precisely because he knows. I create circumstances through consciousness. Current circumstances merely lag behind current consciousness. They will catch up. This is not faith. This is understanding law. The hidden language that programs your subconscious for defeat. Every word you speak is an instruction to your subconscious mind. Most men do not realize this. They speak carelessly, using phrases they consider harmless, never suspecting that these phrases program their destiny with absolute precision. The subconscious mind controls 90% of your mental and physical resources. It operates continuously, mobilizing your body's energy, directing your actions, and determining whether your goals materialize or dissolve. But here is what you must understand. The subconscious cannot distinguish between your conscious intentions and your actual language patterns. It responds to what you say, not what you mean. When you say, I'll try my best, your subconscious hears. I expect to fail and am preparing an excuse. When you say, I hope this works, Your subconscious hears, "I doubt this will work." When you say, "If this succeeds," your subconscious hears, "This might not succeed." Every conditional phrase, every hedged statement, every modest disclaimer these program failure into the mechanism that controls whether you succeed or fail. Let me tell you about a young man I encountered in a Chicago office building several years ago. He told me he was trying to become a successful salesman. I asked him to repeat that phrase and listen to his own words. Trying to become, not becoming, not am. His language revealed his consciousness. He saw himself as someone attempting to be something he was not yet. I followed his career. 3 years later, he was still trying. Meanwhile, his colleague, who said, "I am building a successful career in sales," had risen to district manager within 18 months. Identical starting circumstances, different language, different consciousness, different outcomes. The language you use is not mere expression, it is programming. Let me identify the specific phrases that guarantee failure. "I'll try" is an admission of expected failure disguised as humility. When you say, "I will try to close this sale," your subconscious immediately begins preparing for the outcome where you do not close the sale. Replace "try" with absolute declaration. "I will close this sale," or "I will serve this customer's needs effectively." "I hope" signals doubt. Hope is what you employ when belief is absent. When you say, "I hope I get this position," you telegraph to your subconscious that you do not actually believe you will get it. Your subconscious, receiving this signal, does not mobilize full resources. Replace hope with expect or know. "I expect to be selected for this position." If acknowledges the possibility of an opposite outcome. When you say, "If this works," you admit it might not work. Your subconscious immediately begins preparing for the not working scenario. Replace "if" with "when." When this succeeds. This is not semantic trickery, it is precise programming. Maybe, possibly, might. These words should never appear in statements regarding your definite purpose. They are carriers of doubt that infect your consciousness like disease organisms. For 1 week, catch every instance of conditional language when discussing your goals. Do not try to stop it, yet simply observe. Most men are shocked to discover they use failure language 30 to 50 times daily. They wonder why their goals do not materialize, never suspecting that their own mouth programs defeat into their subconscious dozens of times each day. After 1 week of observation, begin the replacement. Each time you catch yourself saying, "I'll try," stop mid-sentence if necessary, and correct yourself. "I will." Each time you say, "I hope," catch it and replace it. "I expect." Each time you say, "If it works," stop and restate. "When it succeeds." This feels awkward at first. You will worry about appearing arrogant or presumptuous. Let me be clear. This is not arrogance. This is precise programming of the mechanism that determines whether you succeed or fail. The subconscious mind is literal. It cannot interpret subtle meanings or implied intentions. It responds to actual words. When you fill your speech with conditional phrases while secretly hoping for success, your subconscious receives the conditional phrases, not your private hopes. Program success through declarative language, or program failure through conditional language. There is no middle ground. The choice is yours, and you make it every time you speak. Why? Your prudent backup plan guarantees primary failure. Conventional wisdom tells you to have a backup plan and don't put all your eggs in one basket. This advice, which appears prudent and sensible, is actually poison. I'm going to show you why the man with no backup plan succeeds where the prudent man with multiple contingencies fails. When you create a backup plan, you send a devastating signal to your subconscious mind. "I do not truly believe my primary plan will succeed." Your subconscious, receiving this signal, divides its resources between the primary plan and the backup. Neither receives full power, but the damage goes deeper than mere resource division. The moment you establish a backup plan, your subconscious begins preparing you emotionally for the possibility that you will need it. Preparing for the need of a backup plan means preparing for primary plan failure. You cannot simultaneously prepare for success and prepare for failure without diluting both. Worse still, the mind that knows escape is possible will use that escape when pressure mounts. This is human nature. When challenges arise, and they will arise, the man with a backup plan thinks, perhaps I should pivot to my alternative. The man without a backup plan thinks, I must discover the solution. These two mental responses produce drastically different results. Let me tell you about Hernán Cortés, who landed in Mexico in 1519 with 600 men to conquer the Aztec Empire of millions. Upon landing, he gave an order that horrified his soldiers: burn the ships. With their vessels destroyed, his men faced a stark choice: conquer or die. There was no backup plan, no possibility of retreat, no safety net. Faced with this absolute commitment, Cortés's men discovered powers they did not know they possessed. They conquered an empire. Had they kept the ships, had they maintained their backup plan, they would have retreated at the first major obstacle and returned to Spain as failures. The ships were their backup plan. Burning them concentrated every ounce of their power on the primary objective. You must do the same. Examine your current major goal. Have you maintained options or alternatives? Have you told yourself, if this doesn't work, I can always? These seemingly prudent provisions drain power from your primary purpose like a hidden leak drains water from a vessel. The subconscious mind possesses finite resources. When you maintain a backup plan, these resources divide. When you eliminate the backup and commit irrevocably to singular purpose, all resources concentrate. The difference in results is not marginal, it is dramatic. Here is what you must understand. The man with a backup plan conserves energy unconsciously. He holds power in reserve for the alternative path. He never invests fully because part of his mind knows retreat is available. The man without a backup plan cannot conserve energy. He has nowhere else to put it. Every ounce of his power flows into his primary purpose because no other channel exists. Some men will read this and think, but surely that's reckless. Surely wise planning includes contingencies. Let me be clear. I am not telling you to plan poorly. I am telling you to eliminate alternative purposes, not alternative methods. There is a critical difference between a backup plan and a contingency plan. A contingency plan is an alternative method for achieving the same purpose. A backup plan is an alternative purpose in case the first purpose fails. One shows flexibility in approach. The other shows doubt in commitment. You may have multiple methods for reaching your goal. This demonstrates intelligence. But you must have only one goal. This demonstrates definiteness of purpose. The moment you maintain two goals, just in case one doesn't work, you guarantee that neither will work fully. Make this commitment today. Identify your definite chief aim and declare it your only path forward. Eliminate alternatives. Tell people about your commitment. This creates public accountability that removes easy escape routes. Take concrete actions that make retreat difficult or impossible. If pursuing a business, resign your safe employment. If pursuing a relationship, end the alternatives. If pursuing any major objective, close the doors to retreat. Burn your ships. This seems reckless only to the man who does not understand the law. Once you grasp that divided consciousness produces divided power, and that concentration of purpose produces concentration of power, you realize that maintaining backup plans is the actual recklessness. You waste years of your life pursuing goals with one hand while holding escape routes with the other. The successful man burns his ships and discovers that without retreat available, his mind mobilizes resources he never knew he possessed. Powers that remained dormant suddenly activate. Solutions that seemed impossible suddenly appear. This is not magic. This is the natural result of concentrated consciousness operating through definite purpose without division. The choice is before you. Maintain your prudent backup plans and guarantee mediocre results at best, or burn your ships and discover what you are truly capable of achieving. Choose now. How failure consciousness creates its own reality through observable laws. Failure consciousness is not merely a pessimistic attitude or negative outlook. It is a creative force that manufactures failure through specific, observable mechanisms that operate with the precision of physical laws. When you understand these mechanisms, you will see why men who prepare realistically for possible failure create the very failures they prepared for. The man who accommodates failure in his thinking transmits this consciousness through every channel available to human communication. His voice tone carries uncertainty. His body posture reveals hesitation. His word choice betrays doubt. His facial expressions communicate lack of confidence. Others, customers, investors, partners, employees, detect these signals instinctively, though they may not be able to name what they perceive. Their subconscious minds respond to his consciousness, not his words. Let me illustrate with an observation I made repeatedly during my research. I watched two salesmen selling identical products at identical prices to similar customers. The first man approached each prospect with this consciousness: I hope they buy. They probably won't, but I'll try. Though his words were professionally polite, his underlying consciousness transmitted through subtle channels. His voice had a questioning tone. His posture showed slight deference that bordered on apology. Customers sensed his doubt and declined his offers. The second man approached identical prospects with different consciousness. I am here to serve your needs. Together we will determine whether my product serves those needs effectively. His certainty was palpable. Customers responded by purchasing. Not because his pitch was superior, both salesmen used nearly identical presentations. The difference existed entirely in transmitted consciousness. Here is the law. Other people's subconscious minds respond to your consciousness. When your consciousness says, I expect rejection, their consciousness obliges. When your consciousness says, cooperation is certain, their consciousness responds accordingly. This is not manipulation. This is observable law operating as precisely as gravity. But the mechanism goes deeper still. Failure consciousness creates a peculiar form of self-fulfilling prophecy that appears to validate being realistic. You expect difficulty. Difficulty arrives. You conclude that your preparation for failure was wise. You fail to see that the difficulty arrived because you expected it, that your consciousness created the circumstance. This creates a vicious loop. Failure consciousness produces failure. Failure appears to confirm that failure consciousness was realistic. The man strengthens his failure consciousness, producing more failure, which further confirms his realism. He becomes trapped in a self-created prison whose walls he mistakes for external reality. I have seen this pattern operate in thousands of lives. The man who expects his business to struggle experiences struggle. The man who fears his employees will be unreliable gets unreliable employees. The man who anticipates obstacles encounters obstacles that stop others but somehow multiply for him. He attributes all this to bad luck or difficult circumstances, never recognizing that his consciousness created every bit of it. The universe, operating through immutable laws, gives each man exactly what his consciousness prepares him to receive. Now, you can identify this mechanism operating in your own life by examining patterns. Do similar obstacles recur? Do people consistently respond to you in similar ways? Do certain types of failure repeat themselves? These patterns are not coincidence. They reflect your dominant consciousness, creating corresponding circumstances. The pattern breaks when consciousness shifts. Not before. Here is your immediate application. Before your next important interaction, whether a sales meeting, an interview, a difficult conversation, or any situation where cooperation from others matters, examine your consciousness with complete honesty. What do you expect? If you detect any expectation of rejection, resistance, or difficulty, stop. Do not proceed with that consciousness. Spend 10 minutes deliberately reconstructing your expectation, not through forced affirmation, but through understanding the law. Your consciousness creates corresponding response. Say to yourself, this person will respond cooperatively. We will achieve mutual benefit. Any obstacles that arise will resolve naturally because my consciousness creates cooperation. Then enter the interaction and observe. You will discover that the person responds differently than in past similar situations. This is not coincidence. You transmitted different consciousness. They responded to what you transmitted. Practice this deliberately for 30 days. Each important interaction becomes your laboratory for proving the law operates. Document your results. Over time, you will accumulate undeniable personal evidence that your consciousness creates circumstances. Once you possess this evidence, you can never again claim that circumstances control you. You will know through direct experience that you control circumstances through consciousness. This knowledge changes everything. The declaration of mental independence, writing your irrevocable decision. Transformation begins not with changed feelings, but with an irrevocable decision. This is not a wish, not a hope, not an intention to try. This is a definite decision, written with absolute precision, declaring that failure is no longer available as an option. Most men make vague resolutions. I want to be successful. This accomplishes nothing. The subconscious mind cannot act on vagueness. It requires specific, definite instructions delivered with the force of absolute commitment. The effective declaration states your definite chief aim with precision and adds an unequivocal commitment that removes failure from the realm of possibility. This written statement becomes your declaration of mental independence, the formal document that marks the end of one life and the beginning of another. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Your declaration must contain 4 specific elements. First, state exactly what you will accomplish, not what you hope to accomplish, not what you would like to accomplish, what you will accomplish. Be specific. I will accumulate $50,000 is specific. I will become wealthy is vague. The subconscious responds to precision. Second, state when you will accomplish it. Set a definite date. By the 31st of December, 1940 is definite. Someday or eventually is meaningless. A goal without a deadline is a wish, not a decision. Third, state what you will give in return. The universe operates on the principle of fair exchange. You do not get something for nothing. State specifically what service, what value, what contribution you will provide in exchange for your objective. In return, I will provide the finest quality merchandise and service available to working families in this city. Fourth, and this is what transforms your statement from goal to declaration, add the irrevocability clause. I hereby declare that no obstacle, no opposition, no temporary defeat will cause me to abandon this purpose. I will achieve this or die in the attempt, but I will not accept failure. This is not hyperbole. This is the literal reconstruction of your mental operating system. Consider what occurred on the 4th of July, 1776, when 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. They knew that signature marked them for death if they failed. They wrote, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." This was not metaphor. These men faced certain execution if the British captured them. Yet this absolute commitment mobilized powers that created a nation. Compare this with the man who says, "I'd like to start a business if circumstances permit." Which consciousness will produce results? Absolute commitment creates. Conditional intention drifts. Now, write your declaration of mental independence. Take pen and paper, not later, now. Include all 4 elements with complete specificity. When finished, you should feel the weight of what you have written, a sense that you have committed to something irrevocable. If you do not feel this weight, your declaration lacks sufficient definiteness or commitment. Revise it until it carries force. Sign it, date it. This document becomes more important than any business contract you will ever sign. It is your contract with yourself. Beginning tomorrow morning, read this declaration aloud immediately upon waking. Read it again before sleeping. Carry it with you. When doubt arises, read it. When obstacles appear, read it. When others question your commitment, read it silently to yourself. This constant reinforcement programs your subconscious through repetition. The declaration, read repeatedly with emotion and belief, implants itself into your consciousness until it becomes your dominant thought. Once it becomes dominant, your subconscious mobilizes all resources toward its achievement. But understand this: the declaration alone accomplishes nothing. The declaration is not magic words that produce results through mere repetition. The declaration is the foundation, the first necessary step. It establishes definiteness of purpose and irrevocability of commitment. Upon this foundation, you will build through specific techniques I will reveal in subsequent chapters. Without the declaration, these techniques lack direction. With the declaration, they become powerful tools operating toward definite objectives. One final point: share your declaration with at least one person you respect. This creates external accountability that removes easy retreat. The man who declares his purpose privately can quietly abandon it. The man who declares it to others faces shame if he retreats powerful motivation to persist. Write your declaration today, not tomorrow. Today. The reconstruction of your consciousness begins the moment you commit your purpose to writing with absolute definiteness and irrevocable commitment. The autosuggestion technique that reprograms your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind controls 90% of your mental and physical resources. It operates continuously, directing your body's functions, influencing your decisions, determining your actions, and ultimately producing or preventing the achievement of your goals. Yet most men never learn to communicate with this powerful mechanism. They leave it programmed by random chance and accumulated circumstances. Autosuggestion is the technique for deliberate programming of your subconscious mind. Through systematic repetition of specific statements, combined with visualization and emotional feeling, you can implant new dominant thoughts that replace old patterns. This is not theory. This is proven technology that operates with mechanical precision when properly applied. Edwin C. Barnes desired to become business associate of Thomas Edison. He had no money, no influential connections, no apparent qualifications that would interest the most famous inventor in America. Logic said this goal was impossible, but Barnes understood autosuggestion. Every morning and every evening, Barnes practiced his technique with fanatical consistency. He read his written declaration of purpose. Then he closed his eyes and saw himself working alongside Edison as partner, not as employee, but as partner. He saw the office. He saw himself and Edison discussing business. He felt the satisfaction of that accomplishment. He maintained this vision for several minutes while emotions of achievement flooded through him. He repeated this practice twice daily for more than 2 years. During this time, he also took every action available to move toward his goal. He worked for Edison in a minor capacity, waiting for his opportunity. When Edison created the dictating machine and needed someone to market it, Barnes was ready. He became Edison's partner in that enterprise, exactly as he had programmed into his subconscious. The subconscious, properly programmed, mobilizes resources that conscious effort could never access. Here is your exact protocol. Each morning, immediately upon waking before other thoughts intrude, read your declaration of mental independence aloud 3 times. Then close your eyes. See yourself already in possession of your objective. If your aim is wealth, see the bank account balance. See yourself conducting business. See the specific transactions. Make it vivid and detailed. Vague images produce vague results. Precise images program precise outcomes. While holding this vision, feel the emotions you will feel upon achievement. This emotional component is what gives autosuggestion its power. Words without emotion are ignored by the subconscious. Words charged with intense emotion imprint themselves deeply. Maintain this visualization for 5 minutes minimum. If your mind wanders, and it will at first, gently return your focus to the vision. Do not fight wandering thoughts. Simply redirect attention each time it strays. Repeat this identical process each evening before sleep. The subconscious is most receptive during the twilight state between waking and sleeping. Your evening programming works throughout the night while your conscious mind rests. You must practice this technique with absolute consistency. No skip days, no exceptions. The subconscious responds to dominant, consistent thought patterns, not to occasional positive thoughts mixed with constant doubt. 1 hour of autosuggestion followed by 23 hours of doubt produces nothing. For the first week, this practice will feel mechanical. Your mind will resist. Doubt will intrude. This seems silly. Nothing is happening. I don't feel different. Continue anyway. These doubts are old patterns attempting to maintain control. Ignore them. By the second week, the practice becomes more natural. Your visualizations become clearer. Your emotions during practice become more authentic. By the 4th week, you will notice subtle changes, more confident bearing, different language patterns, altered responses from others. These are external signs that internal programming is taking effect. By the 8th week, transformation becomes undeniable. You will think differently. You will act differently. Opportunities will appear that you would not have noticed before, not because opportunities increased, but because your programmed consciousness now perceives them. Continue for a minimum of 90 days to establish permanent new patterns. Most men quit after a few weeks when results are not yet visible. This is the critical error. The subconscious requires time to accept new programming and override years or decades of old patterns. 90 consecutive days of perfect practice. This is your requirement. Mark the days on a calendar. Each mark represents another deposit in your subconscious account. Miss a day and you withdraw from your account. Consistency is everything. Understand this. Autosuggestion is not wishful thinking. You are not pretending or imagining or hoping. You are deliberately instructing the mechanism that controls 90% of your resources. You are programming cause that will produce corresponding effect. The technique is simple. The discipline required is significant. The results are certain. Burning the ships, making retreat impossible through irrevocable commitment. You have written your declaration. You have begun autosuggestion practice. But if you maintain a way out, if you have preserved escape routes and fallback positions, you will use them when pressure becomes intense. The mind that knows retreat is possible will retreat when challenges mount. The solution is to make your commitment irrevocable by eliminating all paths of retreat. This is what I call burning the ships, and it represents the most powerful technique for ensuring that you persist until you succeed. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle with stark clarity. In 1849, a man named R.U. Darby traveled to Colorado during the gold rush. He staked a claim and began digging. After weeks of effort, he struck a vein of ore. He was ecstatic. He covered his mine, returned to his home in Maryland, raised money from relatives to purchase mining equipment, and returned to extract his fortune. The mining proceeded well at first. Then the vein disappeared. Darby drilled further. No gold. He drilled in different directions. Nothing. After months of fruitless effort, he quit. He sold his mining equipment to a junk dealer for a few $100s and went home, defeated and in debt. The junk man who bought Darby's equipment was wiser than Darby in one respect. He consulted a mining engineer before beginning operations. The engineer examined the mine and made a simple calculation. The vein had not ended, it had merely shifted direction due to a fault line. He told the junk man, "Resume drilling 3 feet from where Darby stopped." The junk man did so. 3 feet from where Darby quit, he struck one of the richest gold veins ever discovered in Colorado. Darby had quit 3 feet from fortune. Why did Darby quit? Because he maintained the option to quit. His commitment was not irrevocable. When obstacles exceeded his expectations, he used the escape route he had preserved. Had he burned his ships, had he made success his only option, he would have found a way to drill those additional 3 feet. Most men fail not because success is impossible, but because they quit steps away from breakthrough. They quit because retreat is available. Remove the possibility of retreat and watch what happens to your resourcefulness. Here is how you burn your ships systematically. First, make a public declaration of your purpose. Tell your employer you are leaving to start your business. Tell your family your commitment. Tell friends whose respect you value. This creates social pressure that makes retreat uncomfortable. The pain of public failure exceeds the pain of private struggle. This differential drives you forward. Second, commit resources that cannot be easily recovered. Sign a lease for business space, purchase equipment, make financial commitments. These sunk costs create psychological pressure to succeed. The possibility of financial loss motivates continued effort when enthusiasm wanes. Third, identify your primary escape route, the safe option you would retreat to under pressure, and deliberately close that route. Resign the secure employment, end the backup relationship, eliminate the alternative career path. With the bridge burned behind you, only forward movement remains. Some men will read this and feel fear. But what if I fail? I'll have nothing to fall back on. This fear reveals that you have not yet eliminated failure from consciousness. You are still entertaining it as a real possibility. Let me be direct. If you believe you might fail, you will fail regardless of whether you maintain a backup plan. The backup plan merely delays the failure and dilutes the effort. But if you eliminate failure from consciousness, the backup plan becomes unnecessary because failure is not going to occur. Burning ships is not recklessness. It is rational strategy once you understand the law. Divided consciousness produces divided power. Unified consciousness produces concentrated power. The man with a backup plan divides his consciousness between primary purpose and alternative option. The man who has burned his ships unifies his consciousness entirely on the primary purpose. Which do you think produces superior results? Make this commitment now. Identify your most significant escape route, the backup plan that gives you comfort but drains your power. Set a specific date by which you will eliminate it. Tell someone about this commitment, then execute it on the scheduled date. You will discover that burning your ships releases power you did not know you possessed. Resources emerge. Solutions appear. Persistence becomes natural rather than forced. Why? Because your mind, knowing that retreat is impossible, mobilizes its full capacity. The successful man moves forward with certainty, not because the path is easy, but because he has made all other paths impossible. Burn your ships today. The 5 observable signs of failure-free consciousness in action. Now, I want to show you how to recognize failure-free consciousness in operation. The man who has truly eliminated failure from his consciousness reveals himself through 5 specific, observable characteristics. These are not personality traits he was born with. They are natural manifestations of properly directed consciousness. When you learn to identify these characteristics in others, you can predict with near certainty who will succeed and who will fail. More importantly, when you develop these characteristics in yourself, you provide evidence that your consciousness has been successfully reconstructed. The first characteristic is declarative language. The man operating from failure-free consciousness speaks about his purpose in absolute terms. He says, "I will accomplish this," with the same certainty that he would say, "The sun will rise tomorrow." No hedging, no conditional phrases, no qualifications. Listen to how men speak about their goals. The failure-bound man says, "I'm going to try," or "I hope," or "if things work out." The success-bound man says, "I will," or "I am accomplishing," or "when I achieve this." The difference appears subtle to the casual observer. It is actually the difference between success and failure. You can cultivate this characteristic by catching and replacing every "I'll try" or "I hope" with "I will" or "I am." At first, this feels forced. After weeks of practice, it becomes natural. The change in language reflects and reinforces change in consciousness. The second characteristic is effortless persistence. Notice I say effortless, not grim. The ordinary man persists through obstacles with visible struggle. His jaw clenches. His determination shows. He forces himself forward through sheer willpower. He persists, yes, but the effort exhausts him. The man with failure-free consciousness persists without apparent effort because he does not interpret obstacles as threats to success. To him, obstacles are information about method, not evidence of potential failure. When one approach does not work, he immediately tries another. No pause for discouragement, no emotional recovery period. Instant transition to the next attempt. His persistence appears effortless because it flows from consciousness that sees failure as impossible. You cannot feel discouraged about an outcome you believe cannot occur. The third characteristic is undivided investment. The man operating from failure-free consciousness concentrates all resources, time, money, energy, attention on his definite purpose. No hedging through diversification. No safety nets consuming resources. Full commitment. Watch how men allocate resources. The man destined to fail spreads himself thin across multiple opportunities, maintaining options, hedging bets. The man destined to succeed concentrates everything on singular purpose. One is division, the other is concentration. The fourth characteristic is immediate response to temporary defeat. When a method fails, the man with failure-free consciousness responds instantly with renewed action using a different approach. He does not pause to feel sorry for himself. He does not nurse wounded pride. He does not question whether he should continue. He simply tries the next method. The ordinary man experiences temporary defeat, then requires time to recover emotionally before attempting again. During this recovery period, which may last days or weeks, he loses momentum. The man with failure-free consciousness requires no recovery period because his consciousness contained no expectation of failure to be disappointed. One method didn't work. He tries another. It's that simple. The fifth characteristic is personal magnetism. The man who operates from failure-free consciousness radiates a peculiar form of power that others feel instinctively. Men follow his leadership naturally. Banks extend credit more readily. Customers purchase with greater confidence. This is not charisma or charm. It is concentrated mental force operating through definite purpose. When consciousness is unified and directed toward singular purpose without doubt or division, it creates a force that other people's subconscious minds detect and respond to automatically. This magnetic quality cannot be faked. It emerges naturally from actual failure-free consciousness. Now, observe yourself for 30 days through the lens of these 5 characteristics. When facing obstacles, which characteristics do you demonstrate? Does your language remain declarative or shift to conditional? Does your persistence appear effortless or strained? Do you maintain undivided investment or begin hedging? Do you respond immediately to defeat or require recovery time? Do others respond to you with unusual cooperation? Evaluate yourself honestly. Then deliberately practice your weakest characteristic. If your language slips into conditional phrases, practice declarative speech. If your persistence feels forced, work on reframing obstacles as information rather than threats. These 5 characteristics are the visible evidence that consciousness has been successfully reconstructed. When all 5 operate naturally, you can be certain that failure-free consciousness has been established. Success becomes inevitable, just a matter of time. How this law operates identically in wealth, health, and relationships. The principle of failure-free consciousness is not limited to business achievement or wealth accumulation. It is a fundamental law of mind that operates with identical precision across every domain of human experience. Once you grasp this truth, you understand that you have been given not merely a success philosophy, but a master key that unlocks every door. The man who eliminates failure consciousness regarding his health maintains vigorous health where others decline. The man who acts as if the permanence of his marriage is unquestionable creates the emotional atmosphere where permanence becomes natural. The man who approaches character development with certainty, declaring, "I am developing perfect self-control," transforms where others who say, "I have a quick temper," remain trapped in their limitations. Let me show you this law operating in relationships. I have observed 2 marriages facing identical challenges: financial pressure from business difficulties, illness of a child requiring expensive treatment, and fundamental disagreements about major life decisions. In the first marriage, the husband harbored a fear that his wife might leave. This fear, though he never spoke it aloud, manifested in his behavior. He questioned her loyalty. He showed jealousy. He sought constant reassurance. His fear of abandonment created the very conditions that made abandonment likely. In the second marriage, the husband operated from different consciousness. He faced identical challenges with certainty of partnership. He never questioned the permanence of the union. His consciousness created an emotional atmosphere of security. His certainty became a self-fulfilling prophecy, just as fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Same external challenges, different consciousness, opposite outcomes. The law operates in relationships as precisely as it operates in business. Consider health. The man who repeatedly says, "I have a weak constitution," or "I catch every illness that comes around," programs his body accordingly. His consciousness of weakness creates physical weakness. Meanwhile, the man who declares, "I maintain vigorous health," and refuses to accept illness as permanent identity tends to recover where others decline. This is not denial of symptoms. This is refusal to accept symptoms as permanent identity. There is a critical difference between acknowledging, "I currently have a cold," which my body is overcoming, versus accepting, "I'm a sickly person." The first acknowledges temporary reality while maintaining healthy consciousness. The second accepts limitation as permanent identity. The same principle applies to character development. Most men accept their character flaws as permanent. "I'm quick-tempered. I'm not good with money. I tend to procrastinate. I'm shy in social situations." Each statement is an acceptance of permanent limitation that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The man who has learned to eliminate limitation from consciousness speaks differently. I am developing perfect self-control. I am becoming financially wise. I complete important tasks immediately. I am developing confidence in social situations. He acknowledges where he currently stands while refusing to accept it as permanent. This shift from I am, permanent identity, to I am developing, process of transformation, changes everything. One locks you into limitation. The other creates space for growth. Here is your immediate application. Select one non-business area where you have accepted limitation. Perhaps you have said, I'm not athletic, or I'm not good at maintaining friendships, or I have a bad back. These statements program limitation into your consciousness. Now reconstruct your language and consciousness regarding this limitation. Stop stating it as permanent identity. Begin declaring it as temporary condition you are transforming. I am developing physical capability. I am cultivating strong friendships. My back is healing and strengthening. Apply the identical techniques you have learned for business success to this personal area. Write a declaration of your objective. Practice autosuggestion morning and evening. Eliminate conditional language. Refuse to accept the limitation as permanent. Continue for 90 days. The transformation will prove the law operates universally, not merely in business. Most men compartmentalize their lives, applying success principles to business while accepting failure consciousness in health, relationships, and character. This is a grave error. The law operates everywhere, always, with complete impartiality. When you master failure-free consciousness in one domain, you possess the key to every other domain. Success in business, health in body, harmony in relationships, strength in character, all follow from the same source, consciousness properly directed. You have been given not just a method for making money, but a law for transforming every aspect of your existence. Use it everywhere. The magnetic force that draws cooperation from others naturally. There exists a phenomenon I have observed repeatedly in successful men, a quality that others feel instinctively but cannot name. Banks extend credit to these men more readily than to others, with better financial statements. Customers purchase from them with greater confidence than from competitors with superior products. Employees deliver their finest efforts. Partners eagerly join their ventures. This is not charisma. This is not salesmanship. This is not manipulation. This is concentrated mental force operating through definite purpose, creating what I call a magnetic field that draws cooperation naturally. Let me explain the mechanism. When consciousness is unified, when every element of your being points toward a single definite purpose without doubt or division, it creates a force that other people's subconscious minds detect and respond to automatically. You transmit this force like a radio station transmits signals. Others receive it like radio receivers, though they may not consciously recognize what they are receiving. The man operating from failure-free consciousness transmits concentrated certainty. The man operating from failure consciousness transmits divided uncertainty. These transmissions differ as dramatically as a focused beam of light differs from scattered rays. Here is an experiment I have conducted repeatedly. Place two men of equal ability before a banker, each seeking capital for identical business plans. The first man hopes his plan will work. The second man knows his plan will work because he has eliminated failure from consciousness. The first man presents facts and figures competently. He answers questions accurately. He dresses professionally. On paper, his presentation is flawless, yet the banker denies his request. The second man presents identical information, same facts, same figures, same business model. The banker approves his loan. When asked to explain his decision, the banker cannot articulate specific reasons. He speaks of something about his certainty or confidence in his ability to execute. But what the banker detected was unified consciousness transmitting through every channel, voice tone, body language, word choice, and subtle energies that escaped conscious perception. The banker's subconscious mind responded to transmitted consciousness, not to written business plans. This magnetic force amplifies through complete congruence. When your written declaration, your autosuggestion practice, your daily language, your actions, and your deepest consciousness all point in identical direction without contradiction, the transmission becomes powerful. Any incongruence weakens the transmission dramatically. This is why conditional language is so damaging. It creates incongruence that others detect. Your words say, I will succeed, but your tone says, I hope to succeed. This contradiction confuses the subconscious minds of others. They sense uncertainty and withhold full cooperation. Perfect alignment creates perfect transmission. Others feel compelled to cooperate, though they cannot explain why. Now, you must understand something crucial. This force cannot be faked. You cannot manufacture the appearance of certainty while maintaining doubt underneath. The transmission reveals your actual consciousness, not your intended projection. Attempting to project confidence while feeling doubt creates incongruence that repels rather than attracts cooperation. The magnetic force must be genuine, emerging from actual failure-free consciousness. This is why all the previous work, declaration, autosuggestion, burning ships, developing the 5 characteristics is essential. These techniques create authentic consciousness that generates authentic magnetic force. Before your next important interaction with another person, whether sales, presentation, negotiation, interview, or any situation requiring cooperation, take 5 minutes to achieve complete internal alignment. Read your declaration silently. Remind yourself that failure is not possible. Eliminate every trace of doubt from your consciousness. Create absolute unity of purpose. Then enter the interaction from this aligned state. You will notice immediately that the person responds differently than usual. They become more cooperative, more agreeable, more willing to help. This is not coincidence. You transmitted different consciousness. They responded to what you transmitted. Practice this deliberately for 30 days. Document your results. Compare interactions where you prepared through alignment versus interactions where you proceeded with normal, scattered consciousness. The difference will prove the phenomenon is real and controllable. When this force operates continuously rather than occasionally, when alignment becomes your default state rather than something you must consciously create, you have achieved mastery. The magnetism operates constantly. Cooperation flows naturally. Resources arrange themselves to support your purpose. Others will say you are lucky. You will know you are operating law with precision. The immutable law. Consciousness creates circumstances with mathematical precision. We have now arrived at the fundamental principle from which all success and failure flow. The universe operates according to immutable laws. One such law, perhaps the most important law for human achievement, is this. The dominant thoughts held consistently in consciousness tend to manifest themselves in equivalent material circumstances. This is not mysticism. This is not wishful thinking. This is observable law operating as precisely as the law of gravity. The man who holds failure as a possible outcome creates failure through specific mechanisms we have examined. His consciousness produces corresponding circumstances through his language, his actions, his transmitted force, and his interpretation of events. The man who has eliminated failure from consciousness creates success through identical mechanisms operating in reverse. You are not subject to circumstances. You are the creator of circumstances through consciousness. Let me show you this law operating during a time when its effects were undeniable. During the Great Depression of the 1,930 seconds, while 90% of businesses failed and millions lost everything they owned, A small percentage of men accumulated greater fortunes than they had possessed before the crash. These men faced identical economic circumstances, bank failures, massive unemployment, deflation, widespread despair. The difference was not circumstances. The difference was consciousness. The men who failed held depression consciousness. Everything is collapsing. Survival is impossible. We must contract and conserve. Their consciousness created circumstances matching these dominant thoughts: business failures, lost savings, unemployment. The men who succeeded held opportunity consciousness. Everyone else is contracting in fear. This creates unprecedented opportunity for those who expand while others withdraw. Resources are available at historically low prices. Competition has diminished. Those who maintain success consciousness during collective failure consciousness will emerge stronger than before. Same external events, different consciousness, opposite results. The law operated with identical precision for both groups, giving each exactly what their dominant consciousness created. Now, you must understand the time element in this law. There is always a delay between shift in consciousness and shift in circumstances. This time lag is typically 30 to 90 days. Most men abandon new consciousness because circumstances have not shifted immediately. They conclude the principle does not work. They return to old patterns of thought. Then they guarantee failure. The law operates continuously, but it requires time for external circumstances to catch up with internal consciousness. Your current circumstances reflect your consciousness of 3 months ago. Your circumstances 3 months from now will reflect your current consciousness. Never judge your consciousness by present circumstances. Judge present circumstances by whether they match your consciousness of 90 days ago. If you maintain failure consciousness 90 days ago, present failure is exactly what the law predicts. If you have maintained success consciousness for 90 days, present or approaching success is equally predictable. Here is your scientific test. Maintain absolute failure-free consciousness for 90 consecutive days. Document your circumstances today. Document them again in 90 days. The shift will prove the law operates. But understand this requirement. The law responds to dominant, consistent thought patterns, not to occasional positive thoughts mixed with constant doubt. 1 hour of autosuggestion followed by 23 hours of doubt produces nothing. The consciousness must be dominant. It must be consistent. It must be maintained without contradictory patterns. This is why all the techniques you have learned work together as a system. The declaration establishes definiteness. Autosuggestion programs the subconscious. Burning ships eliminates contradictions. Language control prevents unconscious programming of doubt. The 5 observable characteristics provide evidence that consciousness has shifted. Each technique serves the purpose of creating dominant, consistent, failure-free consciousness that operates without internal contradiction. When this state is achieved and maintained, the law produces corresponding circumstances with mathematical precision. Once you understand this law through direct personal experience, you cannot unknow it. You become permanently responsible for your circumstances because you understand you create them through consciousness. This responsibility is both burden and liberation. Burden because you can no longer blame external forces. Liberation because you can control what you once thought controlled you. The law is immutable. It operates whether you know it or not. It operates whether you believe it or not. It operates with complete impartiality, giving every man exactly what his consciousness prepares him to receive. The only question is whether you will operate this law deliberately or remain at its mercy unknowingly. Why, this understanding is worth more than all the money you will ever accumulate. Money can be lost and regained. Material possessions can be destroyed and rebuilt. But a man who has mastered the elimination of limitation from consciousness possesses wealth that cannot be taken from him under any circumstances. He carries the real wealth, wealth of consciousness within himself, independent of external conditions. Let me illustrate why this understanding transcends material wealth. Henry Ford went bankrupt in his first two automotive ventures. Each time, he lost everything: material factories, equipment, capital, business relationships. The financial value of what he lost exceeded what most men accumulate in a lifetime. Yet, within several years of each bankruptcy, Ford rebuilt greater fortune than he had possessed before. How was this possible? His consciousness, his understanding of the law by which material things are created, could not be taken by bankruptcy. The factories burned. The equipment was sold, the bank accounts emptied, but Ford's consciousness remained intact. He carried the real wealth within himself. External circumstances could strip away material possessions, but they could not touch the consciousness that created those possessions in the first place. Compare this with thousands of men who made fortunes during prosperous times through favorable circumstances rather than through mastered consciousness. When economic depression arrived, they lost their fortunes and never recovered. They possessed money temporarily, but they lacked consciousness permanently. When circumstances changed, they had nothing. They never understood how they had accumulated wealth in the first place, so they could not replicate the process. Ford understood. He could create wealth in any era, any economy, any circumstances, because he possessed the consciousness that creates wealth. This made him independent of circumstances. This is true wealth. Consider what this means for you. Once you master the elimination of limitation from consciousness, you become unstoppable not because you possess supernatural powers, but because you understand and operate natural law with precision. You can lose everything material and rebuild it. You can face any obstacle and overcome it. You can enter any field and succeed in it. The consciousness goes with you everywhere. Economic collapse cannot take it. Competitors cannot steal it. Government cannot tax it. Fire cannot burn it. Age cannot diminish it. Indeed, consciousness often strengthens with years as understanding deepens. This is portable wealth. This is permanent wealth. This is the only wealth that truly matters. Moreover, when you master consciousness, you can teach others. Material wealth divides. When shared, give someone money and you have less money. Consciousness multiplies when shared. Teach someone consciousness and both of you possess it fully. You have not diminished your wealth by sharing. You have increased it. Think about what you can pass to your children. You can pass physical wealth, but if they lack consciousness, they will lose it within a generation. This happens repeatedly. Wealthy men leave fortunes to children who squander them within years, because the children inherited money but not the consciousness that created money. But if you pass consciousness to your children, if you teach them how to eliminate limitation, how to operate the law, how to create rather than merely consume, you give them something far more valuable than money. You give them the capacity to create their own wealth regardless of circumstances. Which inheritance has greater value? Now, I am not telling you that money does not matter. Money matters immensely. Money provides freedom, security, and means to serve others. Money is important, but money is effect, not cause. Consciousness is cause. Money is what consciousness creates. Most men chase effect while ignoring cause. They pursue money without developing the consciousness that attracts money. This is why they struggle. They are trying to harvest crops without planting seeds. Shift your focus from accumulating money to mastering consciousness. Yes, pursue your material objectives, but recognize them as effects, not primary goals. The primary goal is mastery of the law by which material things are created. When you master the law, the effects follow naturally. This understanding is worth more than all the money you could ever accumulate, because this understanding is what creates money in the first place. Master it, and you possess wealth that circumstances cannot touch. The choice that determines your entire future Will you act or drift? You stand at a threshold. This is not metaphor. This is literal truth. The choice you make in the coming hours will determine the trajectory of your entire remaining life. Behind you lies the life you have known. Perhaps it has been adequate. Perhaps it has been frustrating. Perhaps it has been a mixture of both. But it is familiar. You know its contours. You understand its limitations. There is comfort in this familiarity, even if the comfort is the comfort of chains that fit well. Before you lie two distinct paths. One continues as before. You have read these principles. You feel inspired. You understand intellectually, but you do not apply. Within weeks, you will return to old patterns. The inspiration will fade. The understanding will remain abstract. Your circumstances will not change. Most men take this path. They consume wisdom without acting on it. They feel briefly elevated, then sink back to previous levels. 5 years later, they are no different than they were 5 years before. They read more books. They feel more inspiration. They drift. The second path requires different courage. Not the courage to face external enemies, the courage to face yourself. To write your declaration today, to practice autosuggestion tomorrow, to eliminate conditional language, to burn your ships, to maintain failure-free consciousness regardless of present circumstances, to persist for 90 days with absolute consistency. This path is less comfortable. It requires discipline. It demands honesty about your current consciousness. It insists that you take responsibility for creating your circumstances through your thoughts. Many men recoil from this responsibility. It is easier to blame circumstances than to change consciousness. But this path leads to transformation. I have presented these principles to thousands of men over 40 years. I can predict with near certainty which will succeed and which will fail, not by their intelligence, not by their circumstances, not by their current position in life. I predict it by whether they act on what they learn. The man who writes his declaration today, practices autosuggestion tomorrow, and maintains absolute consistency for 90 days will transform. His circumstances will shift to match his consciousness. Success will become inevitable. The man who plans to implement these ideas when circumstances permit will drift. 5 years later, he will still be planning to begin. He will still be waiting for circumstances to improve before he starts creating better circumstances through consciousness. He will be trapped in the circular logic that keeps most men imprisoned their entire lives. Here is what I know with certainty. The inspiration you feel while reading these final words will fade. This is natural. Inspiration always fades. What remains after inspiration fades is either action or nothing. If you wait until you feel inspired again, you will wait forever. Inspiration comes and goes. Discipline remains constant. Successful men do not rely on inspiration. They rely on discipline. The discipline to maintain practices even when inspiration is absent. Therefore, do not finish this chapter without taking the first concrete action. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when circumstances are more favorable. Now, before you close this book, write your declaration of mental independence. Take 30 minutes. Include all 4 elements: what you will accomplish, when you will accomplish it, what you will give in return, and the irrevocability clause that removes failure as an option. Once written, read it aloud 3 times. This is your first autosuggestion practice. Schedule tomorrow morning's practice before you sleep tonight. Tell one person you respect about your commitment. Identify your primary escape route and set a date for its elimination. These actions, taken before this day ends, begin your transformation. Tomorrow, continue. The day after, continue. 90 consecutive days of absolute consistency. No exceptions, no excuses. The man who does this will transform. The man who plans to do this soon will not. It is that simple. I have given you everything necessary. I have revealed the principle. I have explained the mechanisms. I have provided the techniques. I have demonstrated how successful men operate this law. I have shown you that consciousness creates circumstances through immutable law. What remains is for you to choose. Will you act or will you drift? The power to eliminate failure from consciousness and thereby eliminate failure from experience exists within you at this moment. You need not wait for it to develop. You need not hope it will come. You need only claim it, use it, and let it work its transformation in your life. I close with this final statement. Most men fail before they begin because they permit failure to exist in their consciousness as a possible outcome. You have now learned to eliminate failure entirely, not through denial of obstacles, but through fundamental reconstruction of how your mind processes reality. The successful man operates from consciousness where failure simply cannot exist. When you achieve this consciousness and maintain it with absolute consistency, you become unstoppable. Not because obstacles disappear, obstacles remain, but you interpret them differently. They become information about method, never threats to ultimate success. The choice is yours. But make no mistake, it is a choice. You cannot avoid choosing. Inaction is choosing to continue as before. Action is choosing transformation. I have shown you the secret. I have revealed the mechanism. I have traced the path. What remains is for you to walk it. Act as if failure is not an option and discover that it never was.